Hi everyone, Amber here from So Majestic. Thank you for joining me again today. It is part of the Marathon Sewciety's Sew Along for the book Bestie. This pattern is by Carolina Little Stitches. So thank you so much, Kayla, for allowing us to sew up your pattern. All the videos today, everybody's doing something a little bit different. And I think that's so cool, so make sure you check it out if you're looking for a different design or how to sew this differently than I did. I chose to sew it exactly as written in the pattern because I think this is a fantastic pattern for a beginner, and I was completely self-taught, so I really looked for videos that could help me walk through the pattern. So I'm hoping that this could be that for you. It comes in 4 sizes. I chose the largest size. It holds both my thick hardcover books as well as my iPad Air, which is perfect. It also has 3 different flap options. I chose the option with the elastic and the button. There's also a snap option as well as like an elastic that runs across and you can slide the flap in it. I made mine out of vinyl for the flap for both sides. I do think that next time I would do my lining as the water resistant canvas just to make it a little less bulky. And then the exterior is water resistant canvas from my shop. And the lining is just a regular cotton woven. So I did line the lining with Sewfuse Plus, and I used fleece on both the exterior and interior. If you are just doing this for a book, you might be fine with just fleece on the exterior. It does get a little bit bulky, but I do like the thickness to protect my iPad. And the only other thing that I would do different is on the seam allowance inside, maybe taking a little bit bigger of a seam allowance because I used that fusible fleece. It is a little bit baggy, but you don't see the lining at all anyways, and everything fits perfect. So I hope you love the tutorial. Let me know in the comments which way you sewed this up and if it was helpful. And of course, I would love for you to subscribe or give it a thumbs up and help my channel grow. So thank you so much for joining in today and hope you enjoy. So I have all my materials cut out. I have not interfaced them yet. For the exterior, I'm using this water-resistant canvas. It does not have the PVC backing, it's a PU backing, and the edges can fray, so that's why I call it water-resistant. I have just like a duck cloth cotton here for the lining. I decided to do vinyl for both the interior and exterior of the flap. And I have interfacing cut out for each. So I'm only going to interface my lining with Sewfuse Plus to give it some more structure. This water resistant canvas has quite a bit of structure even without the PVC. But I've also cut 4 pieces of fusible fleece, and for one of them I've kept it out of the seam allowances. This here is my Sewfuse Plus, and then I also have 2 layers of Sewfuse Plus and some fusible fleece instead of the Decoville for the flap. And there's 3 different flap options. I chose the one that uses a regular button and elastic closure. So there's also 3 different shapes. So this is the one that lines up with the button. And I have elastic here. It's a little bit thicker. It's a 1/4 inch instead of the 1/8 inch, but I think it'll be fine. I have a button, and I also have a tag that I will probably end up adding in as well. And one other thing I'd like to add before I show you the interfacing is I cut my book sleeve to be vertical. Some others have cut it so it will be horizontal. Either way, you want to make sure if you have a directional print. So for me with the vertical, I had to mirror my pattern piece. So for example, you can see the cutouts here are on the left hand side. But in order to make this so that way if we flip it over and they're also vertical for the back piece, my cutouts had to be on the right hand side. So you can see that's what we call mirroring the pieces, and you just do that by flipping the pattern piece over and tracing it the opposite way. So for tools today, I'll be using glitter clips, Tex 35 thread from Wizardry Stitchery. I use this, my machine is domestic, I use it in both the top and the bobbin. I use 9014 Microtex needles. I have a regular needle to sew on the button, a chalk marking tool, seam ripper stiletto combo, a water soluble marking tool, and snips. If I use anything else as I go along, I'll let you know. Here I'm using my Cricut Easy Press at 310 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm using a Teflon sheet to put over to protect the fabrics, especially with the vinyl and the water resistant canvas. I'm only holding it in each spot for about 10 seconds and fusing the sew fuse from the back side, but the fusible fleece from the front side. So I have all my pieces interfaced now and ready to go. And the first thing I did is marked my center. So I marked it for the flap and both the top and the sides for my lining, which I did with the blue water erasable marker. And then it's a little hard to see on the print, but I have marked my centers with chalk. So we are going to start with our flap, and our elastic tag is going to go on the shorter side, or not elastic tag, our elastic for the button loop. So what I'm going to do is clip that to the center, and you want it to overhang the edge slightly, the measurements given in the pattern, and that's so you know that it is caught in the seam allowance and does not pull out, because remember, this is going to get tugged on to go around the button. So I'm going to take that to the machine and just baste that in place. Alright, so you can see that I have basted that into place, and I went over it a few times, again, just so it's nice and sturdy. And so now we're going to take both sides of our lining and our exterior of our flap. For me, I did them both out of vinyl, and we're going to put them right sides together. And I'm going to take my time. You can match up your center points, but they should line up perfectly if you cut them correctly. And then I'm going to clip them in place. And once I have it clipped, I'm going to take it to the machine and stitch around the three outer edges, the top, the right hand side, and the bottom. This long straight edge I am not stitching because we're going to turn it through there. So for this first one, I'm not going to time lapse because I want to let you know I'm using my regular presser foot. I am using a 2.5 stitch length on my domestic machine, and I'm using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And I'm going to backstitch at both the beginning and the end, leaving this long side unstitched. Okay, so I have just finished stitching. So now we are going to trim down our seam allowance, and I'm using pinking shears for that, but you can use regular scissors as well. And where there's a corner, you want to definitely cut it at an angle because that will help that turn much easier. And actually my pinking shears are giving me a little bit of trouble because they don't like the fusible fleece I have on the back. I really need to get them like sharpened next time. And now the only part that you're not trimming is right here where that elastic is. You're going to trim up to it and then continue around. Okay, so you can see in the time lapse I actually finished it with regular scissors because the layers my pinking shears did not like. So now we are just going to turn this so it's right side out, and our little elastic should be sticking out, and you want to make sure that you really poke out all the corners. So I'm using my fingers to do this, and then I will take this chopstick here and I just use that to help get the corners. So if you used a quilting cotton, you can press this. I highly recommend pressing this down and getting a nice crisp edge. Because I used vinyl, I am just using my fingers and I'm going to straighten it out, and I'm actually going to put some clips to hold it in place. And I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to top stitch around the 3 sides here. Okay, so I'm back at the machine and I have switched out to a Teflon foot because I'm sewing vinyl. It helps it go more smoothly. And I'm using a top stitching length, and I'm just going to take my time and go nice and slow. This strap is a little bit thicker than I really thought about when I thought about doing the 2 layers of vinyl. So as I'm sewing the flap, I am lifting the presser foot with the needle down to turn at the corners and hand cranking where I need to. Okay, so you can see that I have top stitched my flap. So now I have my exterior back, and I want to make sure that my my directional print is facing correct. So now in the instructions it shows it actually like this with the cutouts on the left. I'm putting them on the right, and I'm putting them the flap to the left. So it's a little bit different than what the pattern shows, and that's because I want my flap to open on the right hand side. So what we're doing is we're taking our flap and we are lining it up to our centers. So you can clip your center, and what you could even do is just to make sure that they do line up, that they are the same distance on each side. And I'm just checking because things can shift around when you start to sew. And I'm going to clip them, and now I have the right side of my flap to the right side of my exterior. So for me it doesn't really matter because I've used the same. So you would want your lining facing up of your flap if you did separate lining and exteriors. Okay, so I have just basted my flap in place. So now I am going to do my exteriors and my linings at the same exact time. We're going to put both right sides together, matching up the cutouts. So here's my exterior, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the lining. And I'm going to clip around 3 edges. I'm going to leave this long side that does not have the corner cutouts. I'm not going to clip that side because we're not sewing that yet. Okay, so now that I have clipped the 3 sides together, I'm going to take this to the machine. For the exterior, I am going to sew along the top, the right hand side, and the bottom. For the lining, I'm going to do the same exact thing, except on the bottom part here where we have the cutouts, I'm going to leave about a 5-inch gap where I'm not going to sew it because we are going to be turning our book sleeve through that bottom hole. Okay, so I have my lining here stitched with my opening in the bottom, and the same with my exterior, except the hole is completely sealed. So what we need to do now is box our corners. So I'm going to stick my hand inside and butterfly the seams open. They're a very small box corner, so it comes together quite easily. You could also nest these by turning one direction one way and then the side the opposite, but I want my seams open. It's a little bit tricky with the fusible fleece because it's a little bit thick. Okay, so I am going to clip this here, and I'm going to repeat the same exact thing for the lining, and then I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to stitch along each of the bottoms at the seam allowance given in the pattern. Okay, so I have boxed both corners at the bottom. If you are making yours out of vinyl, you might want to put another row of stitching along inside the seam allowance. That will help so it doesn't pull. And I've done the same thing for the lining. And before I turn anything, I'm just going to trim down the seam allowance on the edges here for both my lining and my exterior. You could probably trim the whole thing if you want as well. I don't think that would be a problem. Okay, and then on our exterior portion, we are just going to flip this so it's inside out, or right side out actually. And you want to just make sure you poke out your bottom. So if you were using vinyl for the exterior, an extra line of stitching would help so your bottom box corners give it some more security, and also help so your stitches don't show. But because I'm using the water resistant canvas, it's okay. Alright, so now we have our exterior, so it is right side facing out, and our lining still with the right side facing in. Okay, so now with our exterior right side facing out, we are going to put it inside of our interior, and you want to make sure that your flap is between the layers. That's really important. And we are going to line up all those center marks that we had previously marked. So I like to start with my seams first. Right, and then once I have them clipped, then I'll line up my centers. And as long as you have kept your seam allowance correct and accurate, this should fit inside each other perfectly. And it's a little bulky with the water resistant canvas and the fleece that I'm using, but we definitely want some type of cushion. And then over here is where I have my flap that I did 2 layers of vinyl, which I think next time that I definitely would not do 2 layers. Okay, so now our top is clipped, and I'm going to take this to the machine and sew all the way around the top at the given seam allowance. Okay, so I have just stitched all the way around the top, and you can see that it took a little bit of having to maneuver it on the machine. So now on our bottom here where we left the opening in the lining, we are going to gently pull the bag through. And you don't want to tug too hard because you don't want to pop any of your seams on this lining part. So just take your time. If you're using vinyl or something that's a little bit more sturdy, you can use a hairdryer to help you pull it through. Okay, so now that I have pulled it through the turning hole, I am going to tuck my lining inside. And I still have the hole in the bottom of my lining, but I'm not closing that up yet. I want to make sure that this fits nicely. And it is a little bit thick because of the padding from the fusible fleece. So I'm just taking my time trying to straighten it out the best that I can. And then what I'm doing is we're gonna have to top stitch. So I'm just rolling with my hands, trying to get that seam pulled out. If you are using like all cotton woven or anything that can be ironed, you could also press this to help get a nice crisp edge. So I'm gonna play with this a little bit longer off the camera, just because that fusible fleece is there, so it is thick, and I want to try to make sure that I have it as nicely aligned as possible. And what I'm going to do is once I have it where I think it looks good, I am going to put clips to help hold it in place for my top stitch. Okay, so I have aligned it and put some clips. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch all the way around, making sure that my flap is open while I'm doing that. Okay, so I have the top stitch going all the way around. So now I'm going to pull out my interior where the opening is, and we are going to seal that up. So you could hand sew this if you want to. I just always machine stitch it, especially because it is inside the bag where no one's gonna see it. And with a little bit of manipulation, you should be able to just line it up perfectly. And I'm not gonna change my threads or anything, I'm just gonna use the same thread, and I'm gonna take that to the machine and just stitch across the bottom here to seal up that opening. Okay, so I just closed up the opening in the bottom, so I'm going to tuck that back into the bag. I think what I would probably do next time is take a little bit larger seam allowance on the lining, because it does fit, but with the, especially if you're using fleece or anything to make it a little puffy, because I think I would just want it to be a little bit tighter of a fit. But that's because of the fleece bulking it out. Alright, so now our last step, this is what it will look like. Here's the front. And if you follow the exact pattern, like the pictures in the pattern where we did this flap, it would have had it opening on the left hand side. But because I'm right-handed, I like that way. And then you can see our back exterior. So now our last step is to add our button on. Okay, so I have everything turned out. I just closed up my inside, and the last step is to sew on our button. So I'm going to fold down the flap, and I just flipped it so I could make sure it's folded over nicely. And I'm going to see where my elastic is, and I want the button just slightly ahead of it. So I'm going to use some chalk to mark slightly ahead. So I have threaded a needle already with just regular Gutermann thread. The thread that I'm using in my sewing machine is bonded, so it doesn't knot as well. And so I have my button here with the 4 holes. So I'm going to start on the inside. I don't know if there's like a proper way to sew a button, so this is just the way that I'm doing it. I looked up a few different methods and everybody does something different. So we are actually going through our exterior and lining. So I also used white thread so it will blend in. So I'm just gonna stick my needle inside and try to find if I was like exactly on point. Came up right through my chalk mark. And also I like going through the lining for this just because it's going to help hold that lining into place. Alright, so I'm pulling it all the way up and putting my button through it. And I'm using a large needle, just easier for me to grab and to go through so many layers because this has all the interfacing and fusible fleece. So now I'm just going to sew an X. So I'm going through the opposite button hole and then coming down through, and inside I'm just making sure that it is all the threads are getting pulled through properly. I should have did that before I came back down, but that's okay. I don't know if you can see inside. I have like a kind of a loop here. So I want to make sure that I'm pulling both my threads. There we go. So now it disappeared. Alright, and now I'm going to come back up in that same area and try to catch the 3rd hole here and go back across. So I'm making an X on my button. You can see the threads are fighting me. They're not going smoothly. So I'm just taking my time on the inside to pull those through. So now you can see I have the nice cross going here. So I'm going to go over each of those, like that make the X 3 times. So I'm going to do that part on a time lapse. Okay, so now I'm going through for the last time, my 3rd time, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go through my fabric yet. I am going to bring my needle underneath the button, so it's between the fabric and the button.
My needle's kind of long, so it's giving me a little, there we go. And I'm going to wrap it around the button, the thread, a few times. And I'm going to form a loop. So basically I'm tying off my thread here. I put my needle through that loop. So I tied it off here, and then I'm going to stick it through one more time. Bring my needle out on the inside. I'm trying to... And so I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to hook a little bit of the lining fabric only. Form a circle with my thread and pull my needle through to tie it off. And I'm actually going to repeat that twice. And I think that should hold the button fairly well. And this Gutermann thread, so right here's my loop again. I'll pull it through. And because this Gutermann thread is not bonded, the knot is not really going to slip. And then I'm just trimming both my threads. The thread that is holding the needle. Sorry, I know it's hard to see while I'm doing this, so I'm just going to cut it and then I'll show you. And then I had some tails here from where the first knot was at the end. So I've cut that all the way down, and you're not going to be able to really see that or feel that when you close your book sleeve. And it should now fit perfectly. And it has a little bit of give, so it won't come off that button. Alright, so we have finished with our book Bestie. I absolutely love this. I think it's beautiful. And I wanted to show you, I chose the large size, and I chose it for two reasons. First of all, I love to read, so I removed the cover just for copyright. So I have this book here, hardcover, and you can see that it fits it perfect. And I can close this up. So it fits my hardcover books fantastic, but I also use an iPad for work. This is an iPad Air, and the large size fits my Air even with the case. And I like the 4 layers of the fusible fleece if I'm using this for my iPad. I actually think it's quite thick and gives it a lot of protection. If you're only using it for books, I do think you could probably get away with only 2 layers of the fusible fleece, because it did make it kind of thick and a little bit bulky on my domestic. Thank you so much for joining in today, and thank you again, Kayla, for allowing us to sew up your Book Bestie pattern. Again, I'm going to have everything in the description, so please make sure you check it out, and let me know in the comments what you think, if you found this video helpful or what options you chose. And as well, I would love if you could subscribe or give us a thumbs up. It does help my channel grow, and I appreciate everything. So until next time, we'll see you later. Bye!